Please help me welcome up to the stage David Acord, who is the David, you're the supervising sound editor and the sound designer on the film, correct? Yes, on 9, and Matthew Wood, supervising sound editor on the film. So that's pretty much all of Star Wars that you're going to see. This is a little unusual. I've never done a panel for a film that I haven't seen and that we can't talk about. So, but these guys have a very, very long, rich history with Star Wars, and there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about. And full disclosure, I've known these guys for 20 years now.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, I used to run Skywalker Sound, so I've known these guys for a long time, and we worked together. And they still agreed to come out and do this thing. So I'm honored to be sharing the stage with them. But let's talk a little bit about your history with Star Wars. Matt, you started when you were a baby on Star Wars, right?
I started at Skywalker Sound in 1990, so coming up on 30 years. Yeah, so I was 17 when I started there.
And what did you start working on?
The first thing I did for George Lucas was I worked in the video games department testing video games when I first started there. And then he wanted to come up with a new technology to how to do the new Star Wars movies that he was planning, the prequels. And I worked on this development team of this program called SoundDroid, which was a nonlinear audio editing system that he wanted to put together at Skywalker to complement his EditDroid system for video editing. And so we used that technology on this show called The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles for ABC. So it was like a whole history kind of tie-in with Indiana Jones, and so that was the first thing I did there.
Yeah. And then you obviously you worked on the prequels.
Yes, that was sort of our testing ground to make the prequel movies. He wanted to make sure the technology was in place for him to do it, basically for him to be able to change things up until the last minute. He wanted to have audio editing and video editing to be completely nonlinear, and so he could have everything open to the very last minute to change and develop his projects. And visual effects wise at ILM, same thing. So that was kind of our in the trenches testing for that. And once he felt comfortable doing that, then he kind of agreed that he was going to do new prequels, and that was starting in about the mid-90s. I started working with Ben Burt on those, and then traveled on into these new ones. Yeah.
David, your history?
Matt hired me on episode 2, Attack of the Clones, in 2001, I think, late 2001. That was my first gig at Skywalker as an apprentice editor. I was apprenticing under Matt and Ben Burt. And then, I just kind of stayed with Star Wars since.
So how different is it working for J.J. Abrams than George Lucas?
Their styles are very different. I mean, it's been, since the company has been part of Disney now, there's been a lot of new directors that came in, and that's, for us, has been fun to watch. A director come in with a new vibrancy and they want to be part of Star Wars, and we're part of that sort of toolbox to make that work for them. Both Industrial Light and Magic and Skywalker Sound are there to make the movies sound and look like what people are familiar with, what Star Wars is going to sound and look like. So we've had a whole myriad of folks come in, like J.J. Abrams and Ron Howard and Gareth Edwards and who else? Gosh, Rian Johnson and Dave Filoni and all these directors come in. But yeah, JJ's style is very much, we work on, it's very frenetic and intense, and we work kind of almost on instinct because everything's just very, the ideas are coming really fast and furious. And George is more of a methodical kind of linear maker of films, and a lot of it comes together in post. But it's just they're very different styles. But we have to accommodate for all those different directors as we do as a service industry.
Filmmakers come into the Star Wars family to make their Star Wars movie. They're all very excited because they generally are people that grew up with Star Wars, kind of like we did, and so they just are so excited to play in that Star Wars sandbox, and they bring their own filmmaking style to that, along with their passion for the franchise, and we're there to kind of help guide them from a sound perspective, keep things in the same pastiche, in the same line of the other Star Wars movies, everything in the same vein, so it doesn't go too far off off the rails. It can't be sounding like Star Trek if it's Star Wars.
Even though we've also worked on Star Trek too, so we got to be careful with that.
Yeah, don't mix up those sound effects libraries.
Yeah.
And you guys also did The Mandalorian.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's been really fun. Yeah, Dave and I
surprise.
supervised it. We have a mixer that we brought up through the ranks at Skywalker named Bonnie Wild. Incredible sound mixer, came out of England and then has worked with us through the mix tech department at Skywalker, and now she's mixing for us. But it's an episodic show that Dave Filoni, who came through the Clone Wars series, which was a wonderful series we did with George Lucas. We did 100+ episodes of that right after we finished Revenge of the Sith. And now Filoni's directing that in live action and with Jon Favreau, who's a huge Star Wars fan. Yeah. So they've both come in and they've made this really wonderful show. And it's kind of kicking off our streaming for Disney Plus, and we've got other shows coming down the pipe as well. But it's been a fun thing to see that the fans really are into Baby Yoda and all that.
I remember the first time we saw that early on, we were like, are people gonna like this Baby Yoda? Because it's super cute. And they didn't want to do any CG, they just want to keep it the classic sort of puppet look, and I applaud them for that. But you just have no idea how fans are going to react to anything new or unique.
Are Star Wars fans mercurial at all? Or they have any? That's weird. I don't know if they. Yeah, that's funny.
But yeah, we're very pleased. Everybody seemed to like it.
Yeah, but nobody has a bad thing to say about sound. Come on, I mean, And you guys, Matt, you had an incredibly busy year because you kept that relationship with Rian Johnson, who directed
Knives Out. Yeah, he did Episode 8 and Knives Out. Yeah.
So Matt was doing Knives Out and Rise of Skywalker and Mandalorian all at the same time.
Yes, there's a lot of delegation that happens, but there's a lot. But yes, those projects are all I supervise as well. But when Ryan was so amazing to work with on Last Jedi, and he's all as I said, new directors coming in and they're having their own sort of take on what they wanted to do with the franchise, and he had it very well planned out, and it was very methodical and not a lot of overtime, and just a really pleasing person to work with. And so when Knives Out came in, we all just jumped on it. We wanted to do it again, and he had a really tight cast. He shot it very fast, and he wrote the whole thing himself and directed. So that's always fun when you have somebody that's got such familiarity with the content. And so my main job on that was running around the world, recording all the actors for the ADR and sort of helping him with that and bringing that all back to Skywalker to mix. And
that's a huge cast too.
Yeah, it was a very big, big ensemble that we're all super stoked to work with them. So the energy was great on that film.
Well, I want to ask you about that because we can talk about kind of the legacy of technological innovation in the Star Wars films, but one of the things that you were the first person I was really aware of doing remote ADR in anywhere in the world on any device possible. So can you talk about a little bit about your crazy ADR situations on the films?
Well, yeah. So on these films, we as Dave and I, we split the sound design duties, and Dave handles all the sound effects, and I handle dialogue and ADR, and then I can also I've done sound design work as well, so we both give feedback to each other, and Dave's actually come on these ADR journeys with me as well, so we kind of need to be able to do each other's work. But one of the big gigs is, most of what you hear in the film, as you know, is the microphones are pointed during the production at the actors' mouths, and that's pretty much all they're trying to get, and the rest is made by Dave and the sound effects department. But most of the time, on these big effects films, you can't use a lot of that dialogue because it's just been ruined by fan machines, or someone's got a helmet on, you can't hear what they're doing. So I'll have to go out and grab all the actors and record them, and I had this idea of coming up with a way that, because it used to be very intricate as far as the technology is concerned, to put together a system to synchronize audio and video and timing everything to get the lip sync right and all that, and it was a very big kind of studio thing to do that. And on the prequel movies, we had this limitation where we couldn't do anything in the United States, so we had to do everything outside of the country for, I don't know what the actual political reasons are for that, but I determined, well, why don't we do it in somewhere fun like the Bahamas? So and so I found a little music studio Chris Blackwell from Island Records owned a little place that Bob Marley used to record in, and so we got that place. We four-walled rented that, and I brought in a laptop system, and we did all that ADR in the Bahamas with the prequels with all the actors there. So they loved it, and so that actually got me a good gig with George. But I try to bringing that. I try to make the actors as comfortable as possible in an environment where they can recreate their performances. And it's because ADR is a very sterile environment. You're not there with all the actors, so a lot of it's imagination. You have to really be there. So I want to make sure it's comfortable for them, and they can recreate what they've done before, and we can do it in an environment that's fun, and it's an opportunity to plus your performance from what you've done before. So and then to get that instantly back to the editors at Skywalker for them to be able to cut and edit and mix, and so that was kind of one of the gigs that I was doing.
So you guys have also been known to do a little voice acting from time to time on some of these films as well.
Yeah.
So Matt infamously is the voice of General Grievous.
Oh yeah, from episode 3. That's right. Yeah. But
you want to tell that story about how that happened?
Well, that's a Well, I'm going to get to another big story in a minute here, but the one about the General Grievous thing was just a really quick thing, which was that character was a completely digital character, was going to be the villain of episode 3, the Revenge of the Sith, and ILM had created this amazing look for what the character was going to look like, with this bone face and the 4 arms with the lightsabers and all that. We were like, who's going to voice that? And so George Lucas, put out this casting package with our producer Rick McCallum all over the world, and we kept getting auditions in all the time. And our colleague who couldn't make it tonight, Chris Garabosio, our mixer, was part of that process of recording all these actors. And at one point, I was taking acting classes, and I'd always been keeping my acting bug going. And he said to me on the last casting package that went out, he goes, "You should do it." And I was like, "I'm not going to do that." And he's like, "No, you should put it. You know what George wants," because I'd been hearing what George liked and didn't like from the different characters, or different actors we were bringing in. So I did one. And I put it under an assumed. I just put it under the initials of each actor that because we had to process each character. We had to process the voice to sound like it was coming out of a voice box in the General Grievous sort of world. And I had like 20 in the last casting package. I sent it up to George. Didn't hear anything. A week or so goes by. I get this call from Rick McCallum, and he says, "Oh, Matt, George picked one. It's the initials. The file name was initials AS." And so I was like, "Oh, okay." So I go to my little key, and I was looking at all the different actors of what we just recorded, and I was like, "Oh no, there's no AS on this list. I screwed up. I don't know which one it was." And I was kind of getting, because he's like, "We need it right now. ILM's got to start animating immediately." And I was like, "Oh my God!" And I realized AS was Alan Smithy. That was my sort of film thing for me. And I was like, "Oh, it's my," he picked me. And I remember I like just started sweating like completely instantly. And I went over to lunch, and I didn't call anybody back. And I went to lunch, and the producer happened to be at lunch, and he's like, at Salad Bar or whatever. He's like, "Matt, why didn't you call me back? Like, what's with the actor? We need to get." I'm like, "Rick, it's me." "What are you talking about?" I was like, "It's my voice." He's like, "Well, what do you want me to do, dude?" I was like, "Just tell George." And so I got back to the office, and George called me, and he's like, "Hey, Matt, I hear you're Grievous. That's great." And so the next day he came in, and we recorded it, and it was in there forever. So yeah, I didn't believe it was real until until the movie came out, until it got to the point where I realized, okay, they're going to have to spend money now to put some other voice in there. I guess it's going to be me now. So then I told my family, and it was a big change for me. But the funny the voice stuff is fun because it's, in sound design, you're working with this, your tool is your voice, and you can work with all the different plugins and microphonically work with, how you want to do something for an alien or a creature and things like that. So like there's in the new Mandalorian series, there's obviously Baby Yoda, and all those vocals and creatures are this gentleman, David Acord, right now, is the voice of Baby Yoda that he doesn't like to talk about. But we'll see if we've only had one glass of wine, but we'll see if we can get him to do the Baby Yoda voice, if he can do the voice.
It's partially human voice.
Okay.
there's a bat-eared fox and a kinkajou kind of mixed in. It's a little bit of everything, but yeah.
And David Acord.
Yeah. It's not happening, Glenn.
We know the sounds of the Star Wars universe very, very well after living with all these films for so long, and a lot of us had toys that made those sounds. Yeah. So, how much of this stuff are you in the new films that you're working on? Are you able to draw from the original, the old libraries, and how much are you having to recreate from scratch?
Well, I think it's scene to scene, and for instance, the Falcon, you're not really going to recreate the Millennium Falcon. We use almost all classic sounds from the Falcon, with the exception of the turret gun. We wanted to update the turret gun. The original turret gun sound was a 50 caliber gun that had, it was a sort of older recording. It wasn't one that Ben had recorded. It was an old library sound. And so it was a pretty ancient sounding recording. It wouldn't really work.
And it was
with the film.
It was just a straightforward.
It was, yeah, that's it.
Artillery gun.
It's an old 50 cal gun. So I just recorded a new 50 cal gun. That's basically all it is. It's just sort of the same. It's the same recipe with different ingredients, and I think that's kind of the trick, I guess, for some of the Star Wars stuff. Is if you want to create something that's in line with what's existing, it's sort of using that methodology to unravel the recipe, like for a TIE fighter. Unravel what that is. It's the elephant scream and the sort of race car on wet cement sound. That's the sort of the roots of what the TIE fighter pass by sound is. So we make some of our own using that same recipe. And we used a lot of that stuff in episode 7. I made some newer ones for episode 9. There are TIE fighters in episode 9. I hope that's not a spoiler.
Can't tell people that.
But yeah, and then there's obviously tons of brand new material, things we've never seen before, and that's when you get to kind of, that's actually trickier in a way, because you want to create something that is wholly new, but also has to live in the same universe as all those other classic legacy sounds and nouveau legacy sounds that you've done.
Well, and I remember, on the special editions, it was a big issue because the technology has changed, and also, those original, a lot of that original stuff is not in that great shape from a sound perspective.
We, interestingly enough, just recently, in this last year, we did an Atmos upmix of episodes 1 through 6, and we wanted to. Well, we'd always, the original films. Obviously, the first movie when it came out, they never knew it was going to be this giant success. So the mix was actually done on a night shift. It was very fast, and so going through those masters, the original film, episode 4, when we had to remaster for both DVD. We did a theatrical remaster in '97, then DVDs in 2004, then Blu-rays in 2011, and then we had a 4K upmix that we just did recently. So all those, I've always tried to go back to the original sources and try to get the best quality version, re-record it into our system with the new A to D converters and get it all, so it's going to be the most high fidelity. Then you got to represent this mix that has been done, and the mix that was done back then is a piece of artwork. I mean, they did those things without automation. They just had grease pencil marks on their faders, and they went through and they performed these mixes that weren't perfect. I mean, there was a lot of errors and problems and all that in there.
Well, I remember having lunch with Ben Burt one time when he was telling me about the mix process, and it just blew my mind that they couldn't punch in.
Yeah.
So they were mixing the first Star Wars movie in 10-minute reels, and they would mix. It was a live performance of the entire 10-minute reel. Yeah. And he was telling me, you'd get to be 9 minutes and 45 seconds, and like your sweat's coming off, because you're like, I can't, because if you screw it up, you gotta
go back. Yeah. It's and the funny thing is I mean, these movies. I don't think there's any other movie that, because Dave and I worked on the DVD in 2004, and that's when we wanted to go back, because the '97. I'm kind of getting off in the weeds here, but the '97 release, they only just took the original mix and just kind of put it into the theater, and there wasn't much time, and they did that. But in 2004 for the DVD, I was like, hey, we have the sources, the original sources. We found some better sources of the material in the archives that we could use, but we had to reconstruct that entire mix from the original elements and go through and listen to the movie in 30-second chunks and go through and, okay, they did this, they did this, they did this. And it was, I mean, there's no other movie I think that we both could have done that too, because we knew the original one so well as children. You know, it's like in our DNA to listen to it where something was wrong or not. But then, funnily enough, as you re-release these movies over and over again, you have such a enthusiastic fan response of what you put out that like that there could be there was one moment in when all the X-wings are attacking the Death Star where I guess we went a little too high with the sound effects as the ships were coming in, and it drowned out one phrase of John Williams' music that was just a huge response, like, you can't hear the attack, the cello on the attack run anymore, and like they screwed up the whole mix, you know. So you want to go through it. We've had the luxury of going back and listening to that and fixing those things. But the 4K remaster.
Star Wars fans they're passionate.
They're very passionate.
About the film.
I would be exactly doing the same thing. I think probably if I wasn't working on them. But the 4K one for the Atmos, Chris Scarabosio was involved. He mixed it. And so I went through with him, and we took time going through every movie. But we wanted to make sure it was going to be tasteful to the balance that was created in the original releases of the movie. The director's intent was going to be there, but you're taking advantage of the new format. We have this new, dynamic range for one in the surrounds and all that, and we wanted to make sure it was going to still, get the story forward. And it's that balance. So we didn't want to like throw things up in the top just for the hell of it. We wanted to make it sound like it was intended, but just spread it out, and that was a really fun process for those films.
I'm sure.
Together.
Well, it's fun to be having this conversation, having been at Skywalker Sound and now at Dolby, because Star Wars is very important to Dolby. Yeah. The first movie in '77 was really the first wide release using Dolby Stereo, and there's a great history of technical innovation around the Star Wars films from an audio perspective.
Dolby EX was Phantom Menace.
Was the very first, yes, and Force Awakens was I think one of the very first releases in Dolby Vision. So it's I'm curious. I don't know if you guys can if you can just give us a little hint, like what are some nice Atmos moments in the new film that we should be paying attention to?
And the new film, when everyone dies at that part. Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, what?
Get these guys some more wine.
No, I'm kidding.
I don't know how to phrase that without giving anything away.
I mean, we 100% mix in native Atmos, so I mean everything's touching those speakers. I mean, it's we don't.
It's the full range surrounds, I think, that we always love the most with Atmos, is having, when something moves around the room or moves from front to back, it doesn't kind of diminish as it does. It's all the same frequency range. We love that.
Well, and you guys use that to such great effect. And to your point, it's not just technology for technology's sake, but there was that wonderful sequence in the last film, and the cave of reflection.
Oh yeah, we're raised in the dark side sort of cave moment there. Yeah, like a lot of that was, very much Atmos related, and I think, when Atmos first hit, I know we were like, oh, we really have to hit those top speakers. We got it, and it was kind of thing we really wanted to hit. But now it's, the tools are so integrated into our process that it's easy to just use it as. We know it's there, and we don't have to it's not gimmicky where we have to do that. We can actually use it as part of our regular filmmaking storytelling device. And so, there's a lot of elements there's a lot of Atmos going on in 9.
We'll be careful to pay special attention to the Atmos in the new film. So I want to follow up on something that you touched on, Matthew, which is the John Williams score. These movies are very, very, very score heavy. Yes. If a Star Wars movie is 130 minutes long, there's probably 138 minutes of score.
There's a lot of score, yeah.
So talk a little bit about the challenges that presents to you guys as sound designers in terms of kind of balancing that out and obviously carving out room for some of this amazing sound design that you guys do.
I think and Dave can speak to this too, that we cover everything in the movie like there's not going to be music. I mean, everything is covered in case that happens, because a lot of the time when you're temping a movie and putting it together in editorial, you might temp the entire movie with music, so you're going to have that in there the entire time, and so when the composer actually gets to when John Williams gets to it, he's going to also do the same thing. So, but there were several occasions in our film, in this recent one, where we were like, you know what, let's try this section without music, and let's try this section without music. So you have to be prepared. Dave's got to have all his material in place, and all his editors have to have his material in place. And so there's a few sequences, and I mean, I know we can't talk about 9, but I'm wondering if there's something in 7, if we can remember, that was a section that we took music out.
Well, there's in 8. There's that wonderful moment when she makes the jump to light speed.
Yes, the holdo maneuver.
And you guys actually take most of the track out completely.
Yeah, Ryan was into that. He liked that section. We on Attack of the Clones, when we did this section where there was an asteroid chase and Jango Fett's going after Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan launches these seismic or sonic charges out of the back of his ship and blows up, and we went to silence for a minute. We kind of took that and amped it up to turbo for on 8 and did it in a few moments in the movie that seemed to be working. But that section where you're talking about where Holdo sacrifices herself to take out the First Order, that was a long, I think it was like, it was like 15 seconds or something of like silence, to the point where they had to release a little flyer that said, "This is not an error." When it came out in the theaters, they were like, "That's," because people were wondering about that.
Well, people are stupid. We do have one scene.
Oh, let's do it.
From episode 9.
Okay.
Great.
Tell us a little bit about what's happening in that scene.
Speeder chase.
Desert speeder chase. So yes, that's I guess a tricky thing from a sound design perspective in that scene is you've got those stormtrooper bikes, those tread bikes, jetpack guys. We've got 2 different speeders, Rey as a speeder and Poe as a speeder. And as the scene sort of progresses, as you can imagine, we're kind of cutting between these different vehicles and these different moments. So they all have to have a distinct sound, but there are moments when they're together on screen at the same time, so they can't clash with each other either. They have to sort of work together as well. So it's about sort of having the right frequencies and the right sort of timbre of each sound to sort of be specific about what it is, but not, it can't be too similar or too dissimilar from the thing next to it. That's a mouthful. But so yeah, that was a bit of a tricky thing, is making that speeder chase. And then all the while, there's music that you have to sort of contend with as well, and a whole different sort of spectrum of frequencies to deal with. And
that's the section where we did end the end of that, which you'll see in the movie. We did remove music.
That's true.
Yeah, the last sort of.
Well, actually, in the beginning of the scene, there's no music.
I can't remember.
Just go out of the music and back in.
I can't remember now. These movies come together so quickly.
Yeah, tell us a little bit. You guys just finished.
We just finished. Literally, I literally got back from London doing the foreign mixes this last weekend. So we are. It's officially done, right? I guess. Yeah.
Sure.
So it's coming out soon. Yeah, we're done.
Friday,
We're done.
yeah.
We're done. It's done.
You're here, so you must be done.
I guess we're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I can't
Thank
wait.
you.
I
Thank
can't wait to see it.
Very excited for everyone to see it.
Just one last thing I wanted to wrap up with, which is I feel like to a very real degree, like all 3 of us are sitting here because of George Lucas.
Totally.
And not just because of Star Wars, although that's a huge part of obviously your guys' career.
You mean the time he dragged us out of the water when he saved us from that boat wreck? When he saved our lives?
Maybe I was drunk. I don't remember that.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, but here's a guy who has invested many millions of dollars of his own money into this company, Skywalker Sound, into building this place for artists to work and to do amazing sound work. But I'm curious for you guys, like Matthew, did you ever have any conversations with George about like what was his passion about sound and why is it so important to him?
He considers himself a sound guy because he did sound in his early career, and he always loved that as a storytelling device. He considered it to be, he has that classic quote where he said it's half, 50% of your experience in the movie theater is sound. And he really took advantage of that as far as like he drove his story forward. And he, I think he loves post-production. He loves the editorial process, and sound has this ability with music, and he was able to hook up with John Williams early in his career, and that was an incredible pairing right there. And he always just looked at it as a huge opportunity to drive the story forward. And yeah, Skywalker Sound is one of the most magical places to work at ever, and that's why I've been there for 30 years. I've never left because it's just such a beautiful place, and he put a bunch of his profits of Star Wars into making this beautiful place for employees to work, and it's caused creativity to thrive, and we're both, all of us, very fortunate to have been part of that. So that's, very, 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 always 100% respectful and humbled by what George Lucas created. Yeah.
Let's open up and take a couple questions. Anybody got? We have lights in our eyes, so we have a hard time seeing. I think I see a hand right here. Yeah.
So about like the old episodes that Disney Plus fixed, kind of like for the new platform.
Yes.
On Solo shooting first.
Maclunkey? Are you talking about Maclunkey?
Yeah. What is
Why?
No. What is the meaning of the
Maclunkey?
Yeah.
I'm talking about so George, when we finished the
You're gonna wade into this?
why not? Sure. So we were working on, what were we doing? What were we working? So the company had been
Just breathe.
sold. The company had been sold, and we were just George was doing a QC sort of cleanup pass on the 4K version of Star Wars that had never been scanned at this high level of scanning. And so we went through and did that, and we had already remastered. We'd spent years remastering the movies for the 2011 Blu-ray, so they were pretty solid in how they sounded. And on a particular day when we were working with George, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, so those 4K masters, I just finished the visual part of it." And I was like, "Okay, great. There's going to be a minor change in Reel 3 in Episode 4." And I was like, "Greedo?" It's like, "Who told you?" And I was like, "No, I just guessed because I know that that's the reel he's in." So I got the reel and I looked at it, and yeah, he had inserted a shot of a close-up of Greedo right before the shot, and then he had changed the timing of the lasers to be exactly at the same time now. So they both shoot at the same time. So we remastered it from, there was the original release, there was the 97 change, there was the 2004 DVD change, there was the 2011 Blu-ray change, and now this was the 2014 4K change. So the funny thing was he just repeated a phrase of Greedo in there from earlier in the take, and I was like, "Well, we can't do that. Like, you can't. It's not.
It grammatically doesn't make
exactly.
sense.
It's Huttese and all that." So the actor Larry Ward, who was the voice actor for Greedo, who's this linguist that worked with Ben back in the 70s. I went back to his original source tape, and I went through and listened to the whole thing, and I found one word that was not used, and the other thing, and it was him saying Maclunkey. So then I cut that in there. And I told George, "Hey, I changed the word that you put in there. I put in this other word." And he's like, "Oh, well, I'm not subtitling it anyway, so it's gonna just mean like I have you now, or it was like a statement that was like a colloquial you're gonna die now kind of thing." So that's what's in there. And then the funny thing was I had to go through on all the 20 different foreign versions of that and change. Not Maclunkey, because that was obviously an alien dialect, so it doesn't need to be translated. But I had to go into all the different versions, because it used to be, "Yes, I bet you have," and then bam, he would be shot. So the sound effect of the gunshot was right over the end of Han saying, "Yes, I bet you have." So we didn't have split masters on all the foreign, so I had to go through and find whatever the equivalent of "have" was in every foreign language of Han Solo and find that syllable somewhere, hopefully that originally was done somewhere, and pull that, and so I could split "have" off to put in the Maclunkey on all of those. So yeah, so that sat on the shelf forever.
You guys think the film business is so glamorous.
That sat on the shelf forever. So I knew when it was going to come out on Disney Plus, I'm like, "Oh, here we go!" Like it's certainly right out. Yeah, I love that stuff. To be honest, I love that the fans are paying attention and people are passionate and people want to, I see something different. I want to talk about it.
All
so
right.
It's great.
Well,
anyway,
I didn't-
long-winded answer. Sorry.
I didn't know that, so I learned something new as well.
Maclunkey, which by the way is
Maclunkey.
going to be like we want to put that on everything now.
We should just all get Maclunkey tattoos.
Yes.
Let's take one more question. Yes, right here.
So, I'm a professional opera singer. My husband is a sound designer.
Lovely.
And we have many fights about who gets the last word in a film. Does the musician or the sound designer get the final word in the dramatic interpretation?
Wow, that's a good question. It's a really good question, and it depends on the scene.
Is the composer? We're talking about John Williams.
Yeah. Well, yeah. John Williams is going to win every time. It kind of depends on the scene. I think it depends on what the scene calls for. It's a storytelling question. Who is telling the story in that moment? Is the music telling the story, or is the music there as a supporting role to the sound effects, or neither? Maybe it's just a dialogue moment, there, or maybe in some cases silence is sort of better.
And John Williams is a super gracious, wonderful man. I mean, he comes to our mixes when we do the final mix of this JJ Films to do it at Fox, and he comes to some of our playbacks. And he'll say it. He'll JJ. I can't do John Williams' voice. He's just I can't
Please
do it.
don't.
But
He calls JJ baby.
He
Yeah, he
does.
does. He calls everybody baby.
He calls everybody baby.
But what I love is we get to call him Maestro, which is like so
I know,
awesome.
it's so cool.
To be able to call us Maestro, yeah, it's amazing. But so he'll say, what might be good here is just no music. We could probably take that out right there. We could remove this music here, and he's very gracious about that. So
He's
it's
the
not like he's like
nicest guy.
everything needs
Yeah.
to be heard. And if it calls for it or not, because having the absence of that music at that moment might just enhance it later down the road when it comes back in again, and it's even more powerful. So it's just, as Dave said, it's totally dependent on the scene, but it's a symbiotic relationship. It's a give and take,
Baby.
So please, yeah.
Of course,
Make it work.
Of course, the real answer to your question is that the director has the final say
Exactly.
about what is going to lead in any particular sequence. So that's all the time we have. I could go for another hour, but unfortunately, we got to wrap this up. David, Matthew, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Can't wait
Yeah.
to see the film.
Thank you to Dolby.